the topic of my today's presentation is a very interesting trial which took place in Rome in 56 BC. And I mean the trial of Marcus Caelius, who was charged with violence. That is, he was charged based on the Lex Plautia Devi, one of the laws concerning using force. The charges against him were very serious. He was charged with breaking peace in Brundisium, with assaulting a delegation from Alexandria, and finally with murdering one of the members and chief of the delegation, that is the philosopher Dio. But Cicero's speech doesn't focus on those serious charges. Cicero actually focuses on one of the minor charges against Caelius, that is a charge of attempting to poison Clodia. Clodia, the sister of the infamous plebeian tribune Publius Clodius, was Caelius's lover. They probably split, and that is why Clodia wanted to be the member of the accusing board, and this charge was added to the main charges. But actually, the accusers can't have thought properly about the consequences, because this is actually the thing Cicero used, and because he was a master rhetorician, he used it so well that he actually made all the other charges sound completely unimportant. His speech was actually aimed at making Clodia a prostitute, a whore, a terrible woman who was not worthy of being a Roman matron. And the rhetorical techniques Cicero used were extremely interesting. And the thing I'd like to discuss today is actually the use of prosopopeia in this speech. Cicero introduces various characters to speak for him, and among those characters there is a very eminent Roman, the censor, the famous censor, Appius Claudius the Blind, Appius Claudius Cecus. And in my opinion, this fact from his biography is one of the most important features Cicero wants to use. What I mean is that censorship, one of the competencies of censorship, of the censors in Rome, was supervising the morality. The problem, however, is that it didn't concern women. The regimen morum of the censors was aimed only at men, and they could be punished with the so-called censorial nota. In the opinion of the Romans, however, women should be supervised by their family members, that is, by their fathers and husbands, and also other relatives. In case of Clodia, however, Cicero thought that it could be interesting to introduce Appius Claudius to speak to her, to reproach her, in order that some of her characteristics may be underlined. And in this fragment of the speech, in my opinion, Appius Claudius speaks both as a pater gentis, as a relative of Clodia, and as a censor. The first fragment of the speech is in itself very significant. Cicero, introducing Appius Claudius, says, if I am to proceed in the old-fashioned way and manner of pleading, then I must summon up from the shades below one of those bearded old men. Not men with those little bits of imperials which she takes such a fancy to, but a man with that long shaggy beard which we see on the ancient statues and images, to reproach the woman and to speak in my stead, lest she by any chance should get angry with me. Let then some of her own family rise up, and above all others the great blind Claudius of old time, for he will feel the least grief inasmuch as he will not see her. Now this fragment, as I said, is very significant. Why? Because Cicero, even in describing Appius Claudius, uses terms referring to old customs. Old customs in Latin are mores maiorum, and mores maiorum is what the censors were actually guarding. So even this first fragment tells a lot about the use of censorial competencies in Cicero's speech. Now let us look at the biography of Appius Claudius. This is his funeral eulogy. This is actually his cursus honorum. And his magistracies, his offices, are enumerated, starting with the highest one, that is with the office of censor, then with the office of consul, interrex, praetor, curule aedile, questor, and tribunus militum. And then his various achievements are described, and among these achievements there are some military ones, that is Complura oppida de Samnitibus cepit. He captured a lot of towns from the Samnites, and he managed to fight the army of the Tusci. But then his most illustrious achievements are mentioned. When he was already blind and very old, he managed to persuade the Senate not to arrange a peace treaty with King Pyrrhus. And finally, in Censura, that is during his censorship, he built the famous Appian Way. He built the first aqueduct leading to Rome, that is Aqua Appia, and he constructed the Temple of Bellona. These activities are connected with other censorial responsibilities, that is with the cura edium, with the supervising of public buildings, which meant that the censors not only built but also were responsible for repairing and guarding them. Now, in one of the last fragments concerning Appius Claudius, Cicero says, "Was it for this that I broke the treaty which was concluded with Pyrrhus, that you should every day make new treaties of most disgraceful love? Was it for this that I brought water into the city, that you should use it for your impious purposes? Was it for this that I made the Appian road, that you should travel along it escorted by other men besides your husband?" So Cicero, in a actually masterly way, is using the most famous achievement of Appius Claudius to reproach Clodia. So he's referring both to the aqueduct, the water of which Clodia is using during her sexual excesses, and to the Appian Way, along which Clodia is walking with men other than her husband. Of course, at the time of this speech, her husband was already dead. She was a widow, but still, one of the main accusations against Clodia in this fragment is that already when she was married, she had lots of affairs with various men who were neither her relations nor friends of her husband. So this is what Cicero underlines very strongly. In other fragments concerning Appius Claudius, Cicero also mentions other people, other members of Clodia's family who could be set as an example to her, and these are both male and female characters. Among the female characters, he mentions Quinta Claudia, who introduced the cult of Cybele, of the mother of gods in Rome, and he also mentions Claudia the Vestal, who rescued her father from tribune of the plebs who was trying to get him from his triumphal carriage during his triumph. And that is very interesting because Vestals were actually the only people who could stop a tribune using his powers. He, by setting those examples, he's actually trying to say that Clodia should be a mater familias. She was married to a very important Roman politician, to Quintus Metellus. The members of her family were all consuls. The women of her family were also very famous. And what she is doing is actually trying to please not those eminent members of her family, but her brother, her infamous brother. So I think that this fragment of Cicero's speech, this use of prosopopeia, is very interesting in many respects. So first of all, Cicero is trying to use a censor to reproach a woman, although normally censors do not do this. And secondly, he is using various achievements of this censor to make Clodia look as a terrible woman, actually as a prostitute and not as a mater familias. Thank you very much.